As Uncle Owen unfastened a clip on a moisture condenser, he couldn't help but voice his frustration to his wife, Beru. It had only been a few hours since his latest fight with Luke, their adopted son, and Owen was struggling to get through to the boy. The day started off normal enough. After checking on the coming harvest, Owen and Luke went into the kitchen to grab a snack, and that's when it happened. Luke once again asked about his father. Owen couldn't help but fear those questions, almost as terrifying as Jabba's Weequay enforcers who would visit the nearby moisture farmers in order to claim their ill-begotten tax. Luke's inquiry about his mysterious father sent the same shivers down Owen's spine. Owen knew it was hard for the boy. Growing up in the sun-bleached desert just south of the Jundland Wastes wasn't a dream for anyone. If Owen and Beru had it their way, the whole set of them would have chartered a course to Mos Espa and lived in a 2-story villa with the northern Dune Sea right on the feet of their patio. But they didn't have credits for that. So living here just out of Tuscan territory and scraping by with meager moisture harvests would have to do. And Owen hoped this type of life would be enough for Luke. But with each passing day, Owen realized more and more that holding Luke back and keeping him safe in the deserts of Tatooine would be harder said than done. Instead of simply answering Luke's questions with another lie, that his father Anakin Skywalker was a great navigator, Owen yelled at the boy and subsequently grounded him, forbidding him from going to Anchorhead to meet his friends. So Luke, as he often did, decided to run away. With nothing more than a thin, worn-out EOP leather backpack and his white hat, Luke started his trek through the desert. After only a few hours, the Lars Moisture Farm was a speck on the horizon with the distant twin suns of Tatooine looming behind it. If Luke had remembered his training for desert safety, which was among the many lessons Owen tried to impart on the boy, then he would have noticed the growing plumes of dark brown sand that were ascending into the sky. But anger clouded his mind. Furious at his uncle, Luke couldn't see that a sandstorm, the likes of which hadn't been seen for generations, was growing in ferocity, threatening to leave the western Dune Sea and strike the Jundland Wastes by late afternoon. And when it arrived, Luke was too far out to turn back. The wind hit him first. Carrying millions of grains of sand, it threatened to shear the skin right off his face. Almost instantaneously, the sudden arrival of the storm forced Luke to his knees as his eyes filled with tears and he struggled to breathe through the overwhelming cloud of sand. As he reached his hand out, searching through the brown haze for help, Luke saw something. The towering black figure of Darth Vader. Unaware of who it could be, Luke must have guessed it was the silhouette of a Tuscan raider. It wasn't uncommon for a raider to prey on the children of human settlers who wandered too far from home, and Luke used what little energy he had left to silently hope that he wouldn't end up killed, robbed, and buried beneath the dunes. Owen and Beru would never be able to find him. But the silhouette of Vader soon dissipated and revealed a young boy. He seemed to be the same size and age as Luke, but instead of a pearl-white tunic, which Aunt Beru had carefully made for Luke after purchasing the finest bantha wool she could find at the 5-day market, the mysterious child was wearing brown cloth. Had Luke been any ruder, like the other boys who hung around Beggar's Canyon, he'd point out that the mysterious child looked like a common slave from Mos Espa. But Luke would never dare to look down on someone. Uncle Owen had taught him better than that. When the black shadow of Vader fully disappeared, the boy reached out to Luke and warmly asked if he was okay. Holding his hand to his face to cover his coughs, Luke barely managed to answer as he desperately tried to purge his lungs of sand. "I thought you might be a Tuscan raider or something," Luke said through fits. "No, nothing that sinister," the other child replied, as the twin suns cast an odd shadow across his right eye, almost as if a scar had been drawn directly across it. "My name is Annie and I think I'm lost." The boy was Anakin Skywalker. Little did Luke know that this was the very person Owen refused to tell him about. This was his father, but not as he currently was. This specter certainly wasn't Darth Vader, and didn't seem to be any deliberate manifestation of Vader's either. Although the Sith Lord was capable of projecting illusions through the galaxy, he wasn't yet aware that he had a child, so he had no reason to try to commune with Luke. Instead, this version of Anakin seemed to be an echo, something that emanated through the living force itself. Together, the boys joined hands and marched through the rolling dunes. But even with the helping hand, Luke was struggling to overcome the storm. In later years, the historians of Tatooine would gather around their favorite cantinas and regale each other with tales of the great sandstorm that nearly ripped every roof off in Mos Eisley. The poor souls that found themselves in the midst of the raging winds littered the desert for decades to come, and some bodies were never recovered. At such a young age, it was no small feat for Luke to take on the full force of a sandstorm all by himself. But by this point, it looked like he was losing. The specter of Anakin Skywalker hugged Luke a little bit tighter and urged him forward. Together, the pair managed to get through the worst of the storm, but by the time the winds broke and gave him a short time to replot their course, they had no idea where they were. When the pair looked around the planet's surface, except for a single cave, there was nothing to be seen. With a second band of wind and sands looming in the distance, Anakin and Luke decided that they had to take shelter. After relieving a deceased Tusken Raider of his gaffy stick, the pair quickly ran to the cave and waited out the storm. But they weren't the only ones inside. After building a rudimentary fire within the cave, a pack of feral womp rats crawled out from their den, with little more than the Tusken's rusted staff to protect themselves. The boys struggled to keep the rats at bay. Luke managed to bat one directly into the fire, and the flames quickly ignited the creature's brown fur. But the womp rats wouldn't be deterred by the death of a single pack member. The surviving three lined up and slowly walked Anakin and Luke back towards the cave's mouth, pushing them once again into the fury of the storm. After only a few meters, the boys discovered the familiar sight of red and white R5 astromech. The winds had eroded the top layers of sand that covered it, revealing its head. With a bit of engineering magic, Anakin figured out how he could reroute the droid's circuitry to produce a massive blue flare. If any of the nearby moisture farmers managed to see it, they'd know exactly where Luke and Anakin were. But as soon as Anakin launched the signal, another silhouette darkened the storm walls. And after pushing apart the sandstorm with a roar, the shadow revealed itself, a Legends Crate Dragon. Looking around for help, Luke couldn't find Anakin, the boy who'd saved him. Without Annie's help, Luke wasn't sure if he could get out of this mess. After all, he was just a silly farm boy whose father had run off to help smuggle spice throughout the galaxy. But for some reason, Luke felt a surge of power tingle beneath his skin. The short time he spent with Anakin had shown him something, that there was somebody just like him in the galaxy. Looking down at his hands, Luke realized he had at least one weapon left, the gaffy stick that the dead Tusken left behind. With a daring attempt, he gripped the stick like a lance and launched it through the open mouth of the dragon, puncturing his palate and driving the rusted gaffy stick directly into his brain. But Luke didn't have time to rejoice in his victory. Overwhelmed by the effort, Luke collapsed face first into the sand below. The storm continued to rage around him, and sand piled on top of Skywalker's back, covering him beneath inches of desert. Hours later, Uncle Owen and a group of moisture farmers arrived nearby. They had been searching for Luke for hours, and by this point, the other men in Owen's search party were silently wondering if Luke had died. Just another young life that the desert had taken too early. But with a final glance through his binoculars, Owen spotted a half-buried white tunic and a bushy blonde head. It was Luke. The four men sprinted to the boy, and to their surprise, they managed to wake him with little effort. Overjoyed that Luke had survived the storm, Owen couldn't help but wonder how it was all possible. But then he heard it. Luke, in between the tail of Crate Dragon and the Womp Rats, spoke about a boy named Annie. Uncle Owen could have sworn that nobody knew that name. Only those closest to Anakin used it. And although Owen was his stepbrother, he only ever called him by his full name in front of Luke. While the other men simply brushed off Luke's experience as a wild sand flu dream, Owen realized that there was something more at work. But he was afraid of what that meant.